Hey everybody, it's Ron, and I want to tell you a story about business and how that story changed everything. It was late 1940 on the MGM studio lot in Culver City, California, well past the hour where everyone else had gone home. 12 hours into a shooting day, most actresses would have gone straight to bed. Hedy Lamarr went to her trailer instead, past the wardrobe racks and the makeup mirror still ringed with bare bulbs, to a corner most people on set didn't even know existed. A drafting table sat there, borrowed and rebuilt for her by a man named Howard Hughes, who had taken one look at how her mind actually worked and decided a Hollywood trailer needed real equipment in it. Loose sheets of paper covered the surface, penciled over with diagrams that had nothing to do with the pictures she had spent all day filming under the studio lights. A lamp burned low over the table. Everyone else on the lot had gone home. She wasn't sketching a costume or memorizing tomorrow's lines. She was drawing a plane's wing. Not for any plane already built. A new shape entirely, pulled from the fins of the fastest fish she could find in a library book and the wings of the fastest birds. And Hughes had needed exactly one look at the drawing before he told her flatly, "You're a genius." It wasn't the first thing she had built at that table, and it wouldn't be the last. But it was late 1940 now. The war in Europe had turned real and ugly. And lately, when the sketches came, they weren't about wings at all. They were about torpedoes. Nobody at the studio knew this side of her existed. To MGM, to the fan magazines, to the men who paid to sit in the dark and watch her face fill a movie screen, she was simply the most beautiful woman in the world. A line the studio repeated so often it had practically become her name. What none of them knew was that she'd spent years before Hollywood sitting through dinner parties she despised, listening to arms dealers and military engineers discuss the very technology now scattered across her drafting table. So what does it cost a person to be known for exactly one thing, while the thing that actually matters happens somewhere nobody's looking? What happens when the world decides it already knows exactly who you are? And how did one woman's late nights at a borrowed drafting table end on August 11th, 1942, with a patent number attached to an idea nobody in that room could have guessed she'd have? From Business Basics, I'm Ron Trucks, and this is Business History, the daily podcast where we explain the stories that changed business forever. Every date on the calendar has a story where business reshaped the world. Today, August 11th, that story takes us to 1942. Known for the wrong thing. The curiosity started long before Hollywood. As a child in Vienna, Austria, Hedy Lamarr's father, a bank director, used to take her on long walks explaining how machines worked. Printing presses, streetcars, anything mechanical that he could point to. By the time she was 5, she had already taken apart her own music box, just to understand what made it play. At 18, Hedy married Friedrich Mandl, an Austrian arms manufacturer whose parties, by her own later account, were attended by Mussolini and Hitler. She wasn't simply present at his business meetings, she was expected to be there as his wife, a fixture at his side to show off and impress all the men in the room. Men who discussed military technology openly around her, never suspecting she was actually absorbing any of it. By all accounts, the marriage was suffocating in more immediate ways too. Mandl banned her from acting entirely and kept her, in her own words, guarded like, quote, some object of art which had to be guarded and imprisoned, having no mind, no life of its own, end quote. Both things pushed her out of the union. Disgust at what he represented and a refusal to keep being treated as property. It was his game to hold me captive, she said. It was my game to escape. He lost. She left Austria in 1937, making her way through Paris and London, where a chance meeting with MGM's Louis B. Mayer turned into a film contract and a boat trip to America. In the process, Hollywood gave her a new name and a new problem. MGM built her identity around a single label, the most beautiful woman in the world, repeated so often it nearly replaced her actual name. What the studio didn't advertise was the drafting table she kept at home, or the smaller version Howard Hughes gave her for the trailer, where she had already sketched an airplane wing design good enough to earn his flat verdict, "You're a genius." In 1940, at a dinner party, she met composer George Antheil, who later recalled her discomfort plainly, sitting in Hollywood making money while the war in Europe kept getting worse. The Allied forces had a problem, and the problem was real and urgent. Their radio-controlled torpedoes relied on a single steady frequency to receive guidance signals from the ship where they were launched. That one detail made them simple for the enemy to jam or intercept. Lamar, drawing on years of half-absorbed dinner table conversations she was never formally trained to understand, proposed constantly shifting the transmission frequencies in a pattern unpredictable to anyone listening in. The idea was sound, but the problem with making that work was keeping a transmitter and a receiver in perfect sync while both hopped frequencies together, faster than any human hand could manage. One side history lesson here about something you may have never heard of, or at least never understood how it worked. Before electronic instruments and record players were common, a very popular means of hearing music played is what's called a player piano. Almost every tavern and a lot of homes had one. Player pianos operated by having a roll of paper punched with holes pass over a bar with 88 corresponding holes in it, each for a different key on the piano. When the paper hole in the roll passed over the metal hole in the piano, the airflow would cause the piano key to strike the strings in the instrument. Now, let's go back to that party where Hetty met composer George Antheil. George actually helped her solve that problematic piece of needing to sync up joining frequencies. By that time, George had spent a decade figuring out how to synchronize multiple player pianos for an experimental musical composition that he was trying to develop, and he proposed the same mechanism here. Matching perforated rolls, one inside the control unit, one inside the torpedo itself, moving in lockstep so both jumped to the same frequency at the same time. With some help from a Caltech engineer named Samuel McKeon, they filed a patent application in June 1941, and on August 11, 1942, they were granted a U.S. patent for a, quote, secret communications system, listed under Lamar's legal married name, Hetty Keesler Markey. Then came the pitch to the Navy. After reviewing the proposal, an officer reportedly scoffed, "What do you want me to do, put a player piano in a torpedo?" missing entirely that the piano was a synchronization principle, not a literal instrument bound for the ocean floor. The Navy passed and suggested Lamar would serve the war effort better by selling war bonds as a celebrity. She did exactly that, raising millions. The invention itself was set aside. Here's the detail that changes the shape of the outcome. The Navy didn't simply shelve the patent and move on. They classified it, stamped it top secret, and locked it away for the remainder of World War II, unavailable even to engineers who might have advanced it further. George Antheil died in 1959, the same year the patent quietly expired, having never seen it used or profited from it in any way. 3 years later, in 1962, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, Navy ships actually deployed an updated version of frequency hopping, built on the same underlying principle Lamar and Antheil had patented 2 decades earlier, well after the patent protecting it had already lapsed. Neither of them ever received a cent. Recognition for the pair finally came in 1997 when the Electronic Frontier Foundation awarded Lamar, then 84 years old, and Antheil posthumously their Pioneer Award. Told of the honor after 50 years of silence, she said simply, "It's about time." She died in 2000, and in 2014 both were included into the National Inventors Hall of Fame. By then, the technology itself had already moved so far past torpedoes. In fact, you are most likely using that technology right now as you listen to this podcast. The same frequency hopping principle that the duo designed became the foundation for spread spectrum communication. It's the underlying idea that modern engineers adapted into Wi-Fi, letting a router juggle dozens of devices without them stepping on each other's signals, into Bluetooth, letting 2 nearby devices find and hold a connection automatically, and into GPS, keeping satellite signals resistant to the exact kind of jamming and interception Lamar had been trying to defeat in the first place. None of those systems use her original mechanical version, but the core idea, hopping in an unpredictable pattern known only to the sender and the receiver, runs underneath all of them. A woman once sat alone at a drafting table after everyone else had gone home. The idea born there now runs quietly through billions of devices that have no idea where it came from. I'm Ron Trucks, and this is Business History, the podcast that finds the turning points behind the headlines. To hear more stories like this, follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen. And if you're enjoying the stories, don't forget to subscribe and leave a quick review. It helps more people find the story behind the business. And if you want to actually understand business better without the fluff or the buzzwords or the MBA language, start by visiting us at businessdailypodcast.com.